I'm super excited. My name again is Chi Kim. I'm the CEO of Pure Edge Inc. And we are a private operating foundation that serves educators and state agencies and nonprofits in our communities. And the bulk of what we try to do is really try to get connected with other human beings and really focus on ways in which we can contribute. Jesse on our team found a study from a while ago about, gratitude and gratitude journaling, but actually it's the feeling that you get when you are giving and being of service that actually helps with some sustainability and really just resilience building. And I think that for me, and I'm really grateful because my friend Jerry White has said yes when I asked to him joining us. And Jerry, if you'd like to just join on the screen. I'm going to read your bio. I know people can actually read it online, but this is Jerry White. I'm very excited to welcome you to the Pure Edge Start with the Heart website and our webinar. And one of the things that we try to do is we want to be powered by human connection. And I think that's the most important piece for us, in a world surrounded by AI and all the other things, there's the human connection. And I think when I met you, we got introduced to each other by our dear friend, Patrick, who is the CEO of Wayfinder. And so I think when we start to connect all the dots of how we are connected and related, it's been a joy actually to see all of these sort of paths crossing. So let me just read this impressive bio, and then Jerry, I'm going to have you sort of connect. But it's 25 years of experience leading change-making campaigns to prevent mass destruction and increase civilian security worldwide. This is from the State Department website, so I just want to make sure you know that as well. You're a social entrepreneur and a senior Ashoka Fellow. You've also helped train the next generation of leadership in scores of countries to transform highly contentious issues into opportunities to unify communities, generate jobs, and build stability and hope. I just wanted to leave that part as your bio, and then you can kind of fill us in. But I think this is so important because, why in the world would Pure Edge ask you know, a Nobel Peace Prize winner to our webinar? And the truth is, I think we just want to connect our network with really amazing human beings. And so welcome. I'd love for you to just share a little bit about just your journey, Jerry, just from beginning. Like, I know you grew up here near me in Massachusetts, but just your sort of journey into just with the education process, and then kind of go into your work and life.
Thanks, Chi, and greetings, everyone. Yes, I'm Jerry White, and I'm here in the woods in Piscataway National Park outside Washington, D.C., where I've spent most of the last, 30 years or so with a family, 4 adult kids. And yeah, if I think back over life, I just was having like dinner this week in Washington with the former presidential campaigner Marianne Williamson. Some of you may know her. And she suddenly turned to me and, didn't know my background and said like, oh, you share in the Nobel Peace Prize. That's like being an Olympic athlete. Like you peaked early. And I was like, I think so. I don't. And she goes, what do you do? I'm usually, I'm Irish, like Bostonian, and not at a loss for words. And I just stopped and I didn't know how to answer. Like, what do you do? And it's a very Washington question. What do you do is really to size you up. Who do you work for? What is your position? What is your prestige and your sense of power? And I find that that's always a little off-putting, but common in this world. So my wife always said, like, she prefers to ask people, how do you like to spend your day? And I turns out that my vocation, my work is I like to spend my day helping people and inspiring young leaders or anyone trying to make a difference in the world in small and big ways. So it just makes me happy to think about flourishing. In terms of my background, just very quickly, we'll hear a little more as I try to walk through what I've learned about being resilient and flourishing in the world. Like that's my aim, to flourish myself and to help others to flourish, and then therefore like the world to flourish. So it sounds rather grand, but I hope we'll get into some of the specifics together.
It made me think of the conversation that usually teachers have. I'm just a teacher, or I just work in schools. And I think it's sort of demeaning, the actual role that we have in the world. And I think that's It happens everywhere, doesn't it? Of the question, but peaking early makes me think of middle school, right? Did you peak in middle school?
I
So,
don't think anyone peaked in middle school, but somewhere along, maybe fifth grade. But anyways, but also that's I think what's an interesting reversal is to say, I think over each decade I've learned what I'm not.
mm,
I'm stripping away. So if some of you know from my bio that, when I was 20, when I went to university, I learned that I was more than my background and my upbringing and my religion of being like Irish Catholic. And then when I went to study in Israel and I stepped on a landmine and I lost my lower right leg, I learned that I was more than my body. So more than my upbringing and culture, more than my body. And then over time, like you do success and you have a CV and a bio, and then, oh, I also did a bankruptcy. You sneak that in there and you're like, oh, I'm more than my
mm,
profession and my work, of course. And then as we get older, you just learn to detach and to realize like that's not me. That's not me. That's not the whole of me. So you find yourself, or I have found myself in my missing pieces. And now I have a elder mother who's 90 and she has Alzheimer's. So this idea of what does it mean to be more than your mind? And she is clearly more than her mind and her memory. So where do we end up in the end? We end up back at zero. And so maybe we come back to starting. Our birth and death bring us to a big, big, empty, beautiful space.
yeah, and I think just really, I think of the arc of your story, right? As a child, as an academic, a scholar, as really a visionary of really trying to give back and create these peaceful spaces in a pretty chaotic world. Um, And I think it comes back down from some of the readings I've done about you and just from talking to you, just really going inward for a while and really starting to think about, what it takes to create moments and habits. And I think that's what I really want to focus on is just the habit building that it takes it's discipline, really, to try and not get all this other chaos to impact our daily lives where we're feeling like we don't have any control. So I'd love to shift over, if we can, to your presentation, just about what that looks like, and then we can go back. And if you have any questions, people can go into the Q&A, but I'd love to have you share a little bit about just what you prepared for us.
Thanks, Chi, and everyone. So yeah, before we start, um, I'll work through some of these slides, and hopefully they'll be helpful just to give a focal point or a vocabulary to what we're talking about. But like you say, like learning to do more with less, and finding ourselves in the pauses and the ability to contemplate, meditate, to just breathe. As I said, I was so busy with life and peaking early that at one point, a woman in Santa Barbara, a board member of one of the organizations I ran, said, Jerry, do you ever like stop and like pause? Like, do you have a spiritual discipline? And I was like so flummoxed by I was,
Mm.
I was like, what do you mean? Like, I have faith, I'm spiritual. And she said, no, calm down. Like, do you breathe? Like, can you just sit still and you don't have to achieve? And I was like, felt like I don't know what you're talking about. I don't live in the past. I just, the next big thing is what I'm after. And she goes, well, you remind me of a donkey with with a carrot strapped on in front of it. Like, what is that carrot? What are you chasing? And I was like, again, didn't know how to respond. And then eventually she goes, well, listen, what I mean by a spiritual practice is just 60 seconds a day. Just take a minute, sit still and breathe. And so I tried that the next day and I had difficulty. I reached for my coffee, I reached for my phone, and I thought, oh my God. And I was like 40. And so this is like 20 years ago. And I decided, like, oh my gosh, I am spiritually clogged and obese if I can't do like a single push up or sit up, like 60 seconds still and breathing and then something's sort of wrong with me. So that was an aha moment of what does it mean? And she said, if you do 60 seconds a day this month and then 2 minutes a day the second month, all the way through the end of the year, by the end of the year, you'll be in shape with the spiritual discipline or practice 12 minutes a day. And so that's when I started to like learn how to pause and breathe.
Wait, so this was at 40, you said?
Yeah. I was so busy with like four kids and work and peaking. and achieving, or just doing the busyness of work
Yeah.
and life, it's a lot, that I hadn't stopped to say, what am I doing? And why does it have to go so fast?
Well, so let me ask you this, and you've got a minute each day, you build up, and it's 12 minutes by 12 months. And has this been a habit of yours since you were 40?
Yeah, so then, but I still didn't take that. I'm competitive. So it wasn't like a Thich Nhat Hanh or the Dalai Lama, like the Buddhism. It was more just like, I'm going to go to the gym and make meditation my bitch. Like it was so awful. Like I was like, I'm going to become a quote, good meditator and master it. So I wasn't satisfied with just waiting for the 12 months and 12 minutes. I went in and then I went all in. And then I was like, I was one of these awful people who just said like then I went to do a 10-day Vipassana silent retreat. So it was like breathing boot camp to get in shape for what? I don't know, but so that I would then achieve meditation or achieve contemplation or nirvana. It's so silly now that I look back, but it just was playing. This woman was very clever to trick me, to trick my system with a simple habit. So like some days it is like 1 minute. Some days it's 12, some days it's like, but I also learned to do several hours or a whole day of silence or 10 days. So I think you do what's needed once you learn how to do some basic skills, it's not super spiritual or religious. It's really just like healthy and needed to flourish. And so I just think of it as a way of life, like brushing your teeth and flossing. You learn to breathe and notice your breathing.
Yeah, no, that's a great example because I think that's you're fighting also against your own nature, right? Of like wanting to be the best at something. So I think, yeah, that's just a really good reminder for us to just slow down. So with that, I'm going to have you go ahead and share what you have.
Great. Well, hopefully I won't talk to, let's see if this thing works. Voila. Oh, we got you. There we go. That's what I wanted to start with. So here we are, like this is my life. You have a nice plan, you think things will go well, and then we know our reality. And a reality can be political, it can be a real minefield, which I experienced at age 20 when I went to Israel to walk in the footsteps of the prophets and the Holy Land. Um, and so, yeah, we hit all of the things that are unexpected, but they really should be expected because life is all about change. There's no such thing as a straight path or fulfilling of a plan. So I think all of us sort of feel that in today's world, like we live in the face of upheaval, uncertainty, and conflict. So that's normal. And there's a joke, one says that no one likes change, but a wet baby. But basically, like we're all wet babies and change is all around us. So why don't we try to actually anticipate and shape the change together as opposed to being a victim of change? So speaking of victimhood, these are two books I wrote not to boast, but to say after I'd worked with around the world with landmine survivors, and met and interviewed like thousands of war victims around the world, I saw that there was like a recipe for resilience that I'll talk about. And that's what I wrote about in Getting Up When Life Knocks You Down. It sounds like a good self-help book, like 5 steps to overcoming a life crisis. But in fact, there are some tried and true ways of building resilience and leadership. And then I went through my dark phase over to the right after teaching for 7 years at University of Virginia, Chi, where you teach as well. That was about, the worst of humanity, like what I call religicide or genocide, femicide, facticide, like ecocide, all the murderous things that we are happening on the planet where we look at the abyss of what we're able to do and how awful it can be. So we're facing this as the fastest growing type of violence around the world is related to religion. So that's my dark phase, as you can see with that. But now I'm on to like trying to be happier, Jerry. So I'm glad we have sunshine and rainbows today on the call because this is about an affirmative vision for flourishing. What does it mean in the face of uncertainty and catastrophe even to flourish? So I talk about vibrating, that you have vision, integrity, balance, resilience, alignment, truth, and enjoyment with ease for flourishing. Vibrate is the acronym. And like today, instead of walking through how one create strategies or vibrate strategies into being, I just wanted to touch upon resilience and what I learned from survivors around the world. So we start with your breakdown. So it might be that these schools, like again, teachers are asked to do more and more with less and less. And so taking care of ourselves and how not to be a victim, like, well, where you shrink and and you have no voice and you're resenting. And so just feel in your body like when you're really angry at the principal or colleagues or the system or your governor or the budget or your kids or yourself. You're just angry and resentful. And we learn that in victimhood, same thing around the world with war victims or trauma survivors. Victimhood is this sort of getting stuck in the past. Well, 10 years ago was so much better. Last year was so much better. We had the budgets. Self-pity, like, ugh, this sucks. I hate that. And you go home and you hear yourself whining. So I'm not blaming or judging. These are qualities or hallmarks of victimhood, and they're understandable. And resentment, boy, are you mad that your colleague or friend got a raise and you might be, furloughed. You resent even success of like other people, and you resent your situation and you blame others. It's not your fault. Yeah, you've been done wrong. So blaming and then taking, when you're in a victimhood space, it's insatiable. In a sense, victimhood is more like a disease or an addiction to like a way of thinking, like nothing is sufficient. Nothing, you crave other things outside yourself that will make it all right someday. But victimhood is dangerous. It is not healthy for us to stay in the space. However, when I meet survivors of war who are missing arms and legs and sucking their thumb or standing on their head in a corner and chanting or in an institution, there is no judgment. But for the grace of God, as I say, or any of us say, would I too be just sniveling and standing on my head if I did not have enabling conditions or co-create them to survive, let alone the fancy word thrive. So victimhood is just to note in our bodies, our minds, and our voice when we hear these things and say, ooh, that's right, this isn't my healthy spot. I don't want to stay in it. It's not so much fun, actually. So then we move to resilience. How does one actually, face facts? How does one choose life? How does one get moving? How does one reach out and actually like give back to the point of generosity and giving? So we found in interviewing thousands of survivors that they did have this recipe of the 5 steps. So facing facts would be, hey, like I stepped on a landmine, I'm 20, it has math, and my right leg is gone, like it's a fact. What we don't think is also emotions are facts too, and it feels awful, and I'm in pain, and it sucks. So facing facts are the circumstances and math of your situation. What are the facts? And not to run into denial. So we hear about when trauma comes, our thinking is to we either do the responses of PTSD is like fight, flight, or freeze. And you don't, that gets you stuck in victimhood. So how do you face facts so you don't go into denial and freeze? And then how do you choose life? So you don't just fight and get killed or freeze or have unhealthy responses. And you choose life by being inspired, by having hope, by having role models. Choose life, not death, by living another day and knowing that the sequel is not finished. Whatever, it's more important, like not the survivor story, like shark attack at noon. It's actually whatever happened to that person. What was the sequel? I find with my own kids, with my students, and in my own life, that my next chapter is more interesting than the last chapter, if I choose that. And reaching out is just, don't turtle up. It's very tempting under pressure, stress, and trauma to isolate and to like go into your shell. But in fact, no one survives alone. No one succeeds alone. So reaching out is something you can do as part of your brushing and flossing socially. Resilience is social. It's not something we do alone. We need each other. And Well, look at that. And then get moving is I got my thing. I got to do my sit-ups and push-ups and breathing. You got to do yours. Maybe you have diabetes and insulin shots. Maybe you have PT or hip replacement. Maybe you have a kid with special needs at home. You get out of bed. You get up. You defy gravity. It's you who are moving. So moving, walking is always healthy. And lastly, the special sauce for resilience, those who are what I would call super survivors, were those who were givers. So even if, a guy in Bosnia Herzegovina or Rwanda was like missing arms and legs in a family, why is he smiling? Why? He didn't get the memo of what happened in the war, that his life is over. And you're like, oh, the secret sauce for people like that are those who are generous, that in small and big ways they learn to give again. And that's where you see the hope for survival and resilience. To then lastly get to this last point of my happy space of flourishing. It sounds so wonderful, right? It's like well-being, thriving, flourishing.
Yeah.
Beautiful words. What do they mean for you? And how do we do it? So that's where I'd sort of like leave our conversations, um, and maybe ask you all to weigh in if that's helpful to stop there.
Well, I think one of the things I wanted to, and this is for anyone, you can put it into the Q&A if you have any responses or reflections about flourishing. But one of the things that I'm just realizing, Jerry, from victimhood to resilience is just knowing how to get out of that cycle of fight or flight or freeze. Right. And I think that's probably the most challenging, especially now. I think in the current context, whether it's the Department of Ed and all the things that are happening there, or sort of the daily barrage of news. Um, I think that's when I think back about your taking a minute to pause, right? We oftentimes at Pure Edge just talk about resetting. It's often the reset. It's not going to change the facts. But what it will allow us to do is just stop for a second, right? Reset, kind of like switch it on, switch it off is one of what our our colleague Jill always says. Just switch it off and switch it on and see if we can do a little bit of a reset. The flourishing aspect of this is getting from, just listening to you, just talking about the victimhood to resilience. Resilience or habit building. I mean, that the whole box there is just building habits. And once you start to do things, it's just like you said, brushing your teeth and sort of daily habits, it gets easier, right? But and doing it with others. The flourishing aspect is actually, I think, the big conundrum, right? How do you flourish in conditions where we are surrounded by all this chaos? We are trying to gravitate towards folks who are, like-minded and of giving. But I would love to just get from you what you think the flourishing aspect. I know that's what you're searching for right now, right? And in your next phase in the book that you're writing. Tell us a little bit about that for you.
So thanks. It's one, I think you're right that getting in shape of the gym of resilience, that's the other thing. It's tough, like asking people to be resilient because it is like, are you in shape? Did you lose weight? Did you go jogging? So resilience is yeah, a series of habits. It's not five chronological steps. Like
Right.
you can actually dive into any one of them and actually like up your resilience, like get in your steps today. Um, but I think but resilience also got a bum rap where you're like, well, when women suffer, in war and in life, or
Yeah.
survivors of all sorts of trauma are asked to be resilient when you're a minority or an ethnic minority struggling to just have equal rights, asking the victim group, so to speak,
Right.
to be resilient is sort of like unfair, like enough already. We're exhausted. This is like the
Yep.
system has us down. It's not like I could go to the gym all day long, but if the system is conspiring against me. So resilience, it's still important and a very important role, and to understand the science of resilience and the steps and the gym of it all, and that it's social. So, but we don't stop there. So this question of flourishing went back to, you know, the sixth step that I didn't write about, that I thought, oh, I'm even exhausted. Like I'm, quote, burning out. And people say that burning out is like sort of a cover or covert depression. Like you're putting out so much effort, you're surviving every day, but not getting to that flourishing. So yes, we turn on the light, we turn off the light, we try another time at the gym, we're back in the game. We're hyper applied people to our families and our jobs, etc. But it's not flourishing, it's surviving, and it's admirable. to survive and to stay alive. Like it's already like a thing, like a gold star. So flourishing, I love the question. And I was thinking when I was playing with my daughter, she must have been only like 5 years old or something. And I, again, as I described, was a competitive, very active father. I wasn't the type to let my children like beat me in games to just make it fun. Like if my son wants to play tennis with me and I win 6-0, he learns something. So it's like not, I'm not proud of it now, but once I,
Sorry, that just I'm just imagining you. Yeah, a game of Uno, that's not going to end well. Checkers is not going to end well. Got it. Okay.
my daughter, my firstborn, she was, I was doing whatever, I was so into the game and passionate that she didn't even have the words for it, but she goes, Dad, be lax, be lax. And I was like, be lax, like she's trying to throw me off my game by being cute, like be lax, that's not even a word. And I realized that that was the sixth step that I didn't write about is that missing piece of breathing. Be lax. Relax, stop it. Like just stop everything. That's the Sabbath rest. That's the enjoyment and the ease that comes from flourishing. You work it into your system. So it was a 5-year-old who taught me that. So when I jump forward to now the science of flourishing, they're basically, and I think it's important to think because it's back to like 3 things you can do every single day.
Right.
So we have PTSD, trauma and uncertainty and like politics and context in the world. Um, And so we say there's the fight, flight, and fright. So we want to be like, what are ways to counter that? That's not showing a path to flourishing. That says we are wired for even unhealthy responses to facing trauma. So that's not good. If you're like some people saying, well, I'm just checking out and I'm not listening to the news anymore. Just I feel so much happy just, turtling into my shell out here. And I'm just not going to even stay up on that. Politics is like all corrupt and bad. And you're like, politics is all around you. So that's a form of freezing or flight from information that may be necessary at times, but it's not a sustainable way to flourish. So I say, God bless, yay, take a break.
Right.
However, as a way of life to sustain flourishing, it doesn't quite work. Or people say, I'm flight, I'm out of here. I'm moving out of this country. It's getting so complicated and like it's 1930s in America. And
Everything you're sharing right now is just being reactive is really what it sounds like. Right. So it's the reaction of whatever context they're facing. And what you're really trying to flip is being reactive and then actually being responsive. I feel like that's really the case for trying to build resilience.
that's the perfect insight. So when you find that you're reacting, not responding, all of those trauma responses are default modes. They aren't healthy response modes, but they're totally understandable and we all do it. So
Right.
again, judgment-free zone. So what do we do that's a response? What do we choose going forward? So in my mind, the 3 things for flourishing or thriving, whatever you call it, well-being, resilience, are 3 things you need. Connection, social connection with other humans, a
Yep.
sense of meaning and belonging, community, number one. So that's one bucket. We want to be thinking about what are we doing to build connection, like we are on this call.
Yes.
Number 2, and this goes a lot missing, protection from violence, from destroying our environments, from like death and destruction around us. We need protection. It's not enough to be rainbows and sunshine.
Right.
Many NGOs, many groups are always like trying to be so affirmative and positive, and there is that bypassing of the shadows. No, there are things you cannot flourish when you don't trust your governments or your neighbors or who has a gun near you.
Right.
Like it's real. So without some level of safety, then you actually can't flourish. So you have to learn to like, oh, what am I doing to protect, self-protect and protect others? So connection, protection. And the third I would call creation,
Mm.
cultivation of culture, like being in nature. So because of the youth or our deficit disorder of being so busy and inside so much, we lose what creation is teaching us all the time.
Right.
Creativity, rebirth, greening, spring, the seasons, all of the lessons like biomimicry is, imitating and aligning with natural systems is one of the ways we flourish. That's why I love the word. It's better for me. It's more than resilience, well-being, thriving, like technocratic psychosocial terms.
Right.
Flourishing feels more organic. So how are you co-creating or experiencing creation? So connection, protection, creation. What are the ways we make sure that all three of those cylinders are revving? If you only have one going on, like you can get by and survive, two, better, but in fact, flourishing, being in flow, that
Yeah.
feeling, even in small and big ways, even in the midst of catastrophe, flourishing is possible. And that's what I'm really looking at. How can I flourish every day and help others to do it?
It's interesting when you talk about the word flow, because I think that's one thing that musicians have flow, artists have flow, right? When you're a teacher and you've got your class sort of in that flow of, creativity or your production. So there's this word flow, I think, is really sort of underutilized, right? Finding flow, even just being out in nature. It's Earth Day today, so being outside, like taking in, just what you talked about is just nature in general. Right, we know that all the research is really clear about being outdoors and, walking in the woods, just that forest bathing, I think is what they call that, right? And then it reduces your cortisol. I think trying to balance out, you've got the victimhood, you've got the resilience, and now you've got sort of the intention of flourishing. And really what it comes down to again is human connection, right? Being able to connect with the other human beings, and that might be different than you. And I think that's part of the beauty of of connection, is that you and I are from very different places, but when we met, we connected, and we've got things in common, but we also have things that are very different in our backgrounds. So I think those are really good lessons for us, especially for those folks who are in school systems in general. I feel like it's one of those great, I don't know, just great endeavors for teachers and administrators when they really try to create these environments where everyone is welcome, and that we are trying to create these opportunities where people can, go away from victimhood straight to building resilient strategies, learning about the world. I think curiosity is huge. And then also being able to create opportunities for flow and, the connection, protection. And what was the last one?
Creation.
Creation. That's right. And so I think just creating opportunities. Um, if you have any questions, you're certainly welcome to put them into the Q&A. But Jerry, just wanted to let you know, for our background at Pure Edge, we work with Stanford University, and we love our principal investigator. His name is Victor Carrion. And Dr. Carrion has, the research that he does is in early childhood PTSD and in resilience as well. And he has a lab, and a couple of things that he talks about is, building resilience. He calls it peace, actually. And so it's the same sort of concepts that you have, but just different framework, and really talking about being present and being in the presence of a caring individual. So again, that connection piece. He's got the emotion regulation, like knowing when to pause, right? Being able to regulate your emotions. And the A is for the ability to self-soothe, that when things get hard, you can actually calm yourself and self-soothe. That's part of it. And then the C for peace is really creativity and having cognitive flexibility, being able to see a different side of things. And the last one that he has is emotional intelligence, being able to identify your emotions, knowing when you're going to get flared up or flared down. And so he uses that acronym of peace in that same sort of way. But I just wanted to share that, because I think what it really comes down to is all of us trying to make sense of the world in a way that we can still be in it together, walk side by side, right? Create some opportunities for students and for others to really just develop some skills and habits. And maybe honestly, from my personal view, it's just trying to look for a little bit of calm. So you can see my dog in the background. They do well all the time. So, but I think that in just having you here, honestly, listening to you and reading your book, the dark book, uh, it was, my daughter had to, she's watching Schindler's List for school right now. And having watched the film for, a few times, and then rewatching it recently, and then reading your book, and just really there's so much loss in the world. And I think part of what I'm hoping for is when we have conversations like this and just have little moments, that it does help me personally to pause and to stop and think about, ways in which we, as you shared, give back and create ways and spaces to make life a little bit better. But
Maybe if I could, I was going to go back and
yeah,
share this question of the flourishing, but also the science of resilience. So
Yeah.
by the ways we show flourishing or like
Yeah.
leadership are sort of mirrors of the other things we're doing and courage. And one of the things that I'm looking at is in flourishing, you'll note in the words, and most of this, as I've mentioned, is social. So
Yeah.
courage is not courage so like just for yourself or humor to like make yourself laugh in the day or like empathy for yourself or patience with yourself or like, yes, how we treat ourselves and self-care is
Right.
super important. In my work and in my life, I have more and more, and you have this phrase, people say your outer work is only as good as your inner work. And
Right.
I have a little reaction to that, which I say, true, okay, point. But your inner work is also only as good as your outer work.
Yeah.
That we are in a context and we live in a society and we are created as meaning and seeking creatures who are social. So when we look at the studies of, at Yale and Mount Sinai School of Medicine,
Mhm.
besides my anecdotes and my own studies and research, it shows, oh, here are the 10 hallmarks
Yeah.
of resilience: optimism, altruism, moral compass, faith and spirituality, humor, having a role model, social support, facing fear or courage, having a mission, and training. And I ask you, as you look at the list, how many of these things are you born with?
Yeah.
And how many of these things are a solo sport?
When I look at this list, Jerry, it makes me think of the two ways in which we can view the world as a zero-sum game, right? Or a positive sum game. And that's how schools are structured as I think with testing zero sum, right? Getting into college, zero sum. But positive sum is like the world is big enough for all of us. It's that abundance culture, right? And when I look at this list right now, um, folks who are wanting to move forward and build communities and do better for all, I mean, it's just very telling of how much the inner and outer work are aligned.
I think maybe optimism, when I think even when Nelson Mandela was asked, like, what is, his optimism, that was something he
Yeah,
maintained. And whether that was nature or nurture, it's probably the only one on the list of the 10 that you could say, oh, that's like, it's like optimism or pessimism, like, or your wiring, are you more an Eeyore or, who are,
right.
um, so that one aside, I think this interdependence. So,
Yeah,
as you talked about the Stanford researcher and his peace construct, there are two things. It's not to counter that. It's just to say my reflection in my current work
yeah,
today says there are two things that I struggle with. One is the word peace, because everyone has always said, well, Jerry, you're like a Nobel Peace Prize winner and you
yeah,
share in peace and you're a peace builder and a bridge builder. And I have learned that I am not. That peace is that is, like you're saying, the fruit of all those ingredients or
yeah,
the enabling conditions. So when Rigoberta Menchú, another Nobel Prize winner and a Guatemalan who was indigenous, said like peace in her culture, there's not like a technocratic word for it. It's
right.
like a ripe, juicy pear or fruit hanging on the tree before, like it's like just so you want to reach for it, and because of the enabling conditions of fire, air, earth and water, sunshine, rain, etc., you're able to have the fruit, which is the peace. So there's certain words like love, peace, justice, humility that are holy to me, and so I have a they're hard. Maybe words fail us because we need metaphors such as fruit
Yeah,
to say what it is. And the second thing is understanding that if you do all of your self-care techniques and have like your top 10 list of being resilient, going to the gym and being healthy and taking care of yourself, your own personal or inner transformation is, as we say, necessary, but not sufficient for transformative change. So if you are saying, hey, I'm not racist or I'm not sexist and I've done all these like things, you're like, no, the system is such that we participate in a system that is problematic. So in fact, the interdependence that we all survive and thrive and flourish together. There's no such thing as it being a lone sport. So I look for the questions of courage. What are teachers doing and what are we all doing to connect with others, to protect those who are vulnerable among us and the champions with courage, and to show collective courage in the face of uncertainty and crisis, so that we're in it together, we achieve it together, and it's interdependent. So I increasingly don't even think there's any such thing as peace as a thing. It's either we are in the midst of thundering thunderstorms, we are having collective calm with courage for change of systems that abuse. So does that make sense? Like being an executive producer of
Yeah,
systemic change is where I feel my calling is, beyond just surviving. Does that make any sense, what I
it
said?
does. And I think that kind of leads you to really why we're here, right? Your inner fire leading to leadership, right? So that inner fire that you share so robustly, honestly, I think since I've met you, is that you're not satisfied with having these baby steps. And I think that's actually, if I've learned anything about you in the last, year, is that baby steps are great, but you're really going to go for it in the big piece. If you are interested in knowing more about Jerry, you can follow him on LinkedIn. He's got um, a title series. I think you had a challenge of like what title is resonating with your followers on LinkedIn as well. But I think that just I want to leave that there because I think that's really where we're at in terms of just, how do you take that inner fire wherever you're at and on this sort of, you know, uh, the ability to kind of capitalize on that energy, that inertia, and finding like-minded folks to be able to share, whether it's through your teaching network or whether it's through, the universities or whether it's through just these conversations. I know that you motivate me to just learn more, Jerry. Honestly, I think if I had to name what you've done for me is just I just am much more curious about things that are hard. And your book, frankly, it was hard to read because there was just a lot between the genocide, ecocide, and facticide. Like it just was overwhelming. But I don't want to look away. So I guess it really was my moment where I'm like, okay, it's okay. I'm a big girl. I can read. I can, figure out what it is that I might want to try or be a part of in terms of a movement to reduce these kinds of things. And ultimately, I think the way we're wired and why you're here is just we're trying to give back in a certain way and try to inform and have folks just stay curious. But ultimately, I think between your research, all the teaching you've done, just the ability to garner support. I'm just so grateful. I know you've gone around the world and back a few times and sharing your wisdom and really being a part of something big and extraordinary. And I know that your next book will be that as well. So with that, I don't know if you have any closing remarks, but I just wanted to thank you. We're just very grateful.
Thanks so much, Chi. You're a role model for us, and you're so applied in all of the above. And I think what I was realizing in my last job, I was running the United Religions Initiative for
Yeah.
about 3 years. I just wrapped up. And I learned, so the good news is they taught me about flourishing too in groups. So the URI, as it's known, is the largest interfaith grassroots network in the world in over 110 countries. And they had a little formula, like a very creative idea, which is like to get 7 different people from 3 different faiths working together on like a problem in their backyard. So sort of trick the system with this sort of DNA of community and connection. So we did a study in the last 3 years of what has happened over the last 25 years of creating 1,200 of these interfaith cooperation circles. And it was very validating. Oh, interfaith matters, working with people of difference, not just your own tribe,
Right.
and then doing pragmatic things in your backyard together that build. So it was the building of connection, meaning, and belonging. So really just great reviews on like, you need a formula, not just to pair up, but to work in cohorts of
Yeah.
like resilient action. And when you feel overwhelmed, to be in action. So it wasn't about dialogue ad nauseum, interfaith dialogue. It was actually to be in cooperative action together. So that was one thing. But the other piece was of the mission was to end religiously motivated violence. And that was the protection side, apart from interfaith connection. How do you protect religious minorities and people of difference who are being singled out and abused? And how do we protect ourselves? So that's why having strategies of interrupting violence, which sounds bigger, so genocide, religicide, those are big, but in fact, how to interrupt disempowering conversations. So when we break it down to ourselves, it means like how to interrupt, any of the isms that show up in our day to day. So we listen deeply, we speak responsibly, and then we interrupt disempowering conversation like as needed. And so that's where an individual's work is day to day. You have an exercise of being a leader and interrupting violence and hate speech and inappropriateness, not as language police, but just as a way of shining your light and being a flourishing a role model that I think you are, Chi. So I think that, and then the other piece I'd leave with is, yeah, from the V word of violence. Like it's so awful and it's going to grow. It is growing.
Yeah.
It is coming. And I think our own country in the United States, we will see more of it, not less, in the coming period as we go through a new birth canal of change. And so, but to not be afraid. So the thing about being curious, the word you use a lot, be curious about anger. And so I felt when I talked about discovering my own fire, when you feel outrage or anger or hatred or disdain, to be curious and do not suppress.
Yeah.
Observe, that's the breathing technique helps you. Observe, look at me, look how it feels in my body. It's red
Yeah.
hot. My blood is boiling.
Yeah.
And then to say again, back to resilience, face facts. This thing was done. I feel awful. It shows up in my body this way. I can observe it. It has emotions and molecules and chemical reactions around it. It just is. So moving to that acceptance is really important. I find that people, if they jump just to connection and creation, like
Yeah.
La La Land, and they don't understand how to manage the range of human emotion. So when I see rainbow, I always say, there's a hot red somewhere in that rainbow, right? Not just
That's
pastel.
great. Yeah.
So let's not just deal in swiping pastels. Let's actually not be afraid of actually the hot red blood. And then when you manage fire, you realize fire warms us, it sparks, it inspires, it helps purify. It does. There's so many things in the gift of fire that doesn't have to be destructive, having to do with anger. So learning to channel our anxiety and anger in ways that transform it into productive, like making good trouble. That's what I would leave with, is like very important not to be shy in the world that we live in right now, and not to shy away from what's actually happening around us and in our bodies.
And I just want to close out with, if you do want a little uplift, I know it's not a recent book. Was it 2009? Is that 2009? But it's Getting Up When Life Knocks You Down. I think it's probably a really appropriate book right now in this moment in time, honestly. I just want to thank you, Jerry, again. It's so fun to talk to you. And also, I appreciate you slowing down because you talk so fast when we're together. It's been so fun. So thank you so much for just joining us. And if you are interested in any of, just Jerry's talks, he's got a whole, if you just look on YouTube, if you look online, and finding ways in which you can be more inspired by Jerry White.
Thanks, Chi. I think you're a role model for inspiration, and yeah, just keep it simple. How do I connect today? How do I protect today? And how do I co-create today in like little ways? And that's good enough for today. And,
All
and
right.
thank you for having me on. This has
Thank
been
you,
great.
Jerry. It was great. Have enjoy the rest of the week. I'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.